The IEC has welcomed the decision by the Electoral Court to dismiss 5 cases against it. The cases related to the non-compliance with the requirements for candidates' nomination. The following parties: Operation Dudula, Arise South Africa, Cape Independence Party, Defenders of the People and Independent South African National Civic Organization, had approached the court for a resolution. For more on this, election analyst Michael Atkins joins us. Michael, a very good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, yes. And I think it's fair to say that the Electoral Commission welcomes the finality of the situation rather than the fact that the particular parties failed in their application. Because obviously the IEC can now begin the enormous task of printing ballot papers.
And I guess let's start right there, Michael. Is this finality? Is there no other avenue for these parties to challenge this so that the IEC, as you say, can start printing ballot papers?
Well, in the ordinary course of events, the Electoral Court judgments are not reviewable or appealable. But because the Constitutional Court is the final court of appeal, it is possible, as we know in the MK matter, the Commission itself is appealing the ruling of the court. Now, in the news, it has been reported that Operation Dudula intends to appeal to the Constitutional Court, and the Labour Party, which is another party whose exclusion was confirmed in a judgment on Monday, have filed papers with the Constitutional Court already, but we don't know yet whether the court will give access on an urgent basis.
Now, when you look at these particular cases, Michael, I mean, what does it mean? I mean, looking at the fact that it comes down to non-compliance, if one can put it in that effect, does it show maybe parties that were ill-prepared, unprepared, or maybe because we're seeing, an evolution of more parties coming into being, saying that more parties trying to, I guess, find space within the, the elections in South Africa?
Look, the term non-compliance is technically correct. The particular parties did not meet the specified requirements by the given deadline. But of course, as has been shown in the court papers, several of those parties are contending that there were problems with the online systems, the online portal that the IEC provided. And of course, we have the fact that for the first time, large numbers of signatures had to be uploaded in a particular format. There were spreadsheets with details that had to be uploaded. So there are new aspects to the process that haven't applied in previous elections, and it's difficult from the outside to say, well, is it because the parties were slack or just left it to the last second, or were there actually technical problems that prevented good faith applications from being completed?
But I mean, with the cases being taken to the Electoral Court, one would say that some of those T's and dots that needed to be crossed and dotted might have been double-checked when it went to the Electoral Court, and the Electoral Court thus ruling in favor of the IEC for, as you say, the right term, non-compliance.
Look, again, it's difficult to tell from the outside. The IEC has rightly always been very strict with the requirements, because if they weren't, you'd have this constant stream of parties submitting material late. The Electoral Court hasn't released the judgment with the latest 5, but the previous group of parties with the judgment on Monday, the Electoral Court dealt with the matter, but there was not much detail given. The primary reasoning given by the court was that, there were many other parties that did succeed, so, how can we say that the systems weren't working? Whereas if one looks at the papers, there are quite detailed accounts of the system hanging or resetting and having to restart processes. When you have a potentially overloaded computer system, some people succeed in what they do and others don't. So again, without a full scrutiny of the details, it's difficult for us to judge as outsiders where the balance lies. Were the parties slack, or were the IEC systems not coping with the load?
Now, just slightly moving away from these particular cases, Michael, I mean, looking at the number of parties that have, showed their intentions to contest the elections, did that or does that come as a surprise? And maybe that's why, as we're saying, that it could be that maybe the systems were not prepared for this kind of response to the elections themselves.
Well, there's two parts to this. In terms of the number of parties that are on the ballot now, this number is very similar to that which is applied or which applied in the last election. The numbers have steadily increased over the years, but instead of 48 parties on the national ballot in 2019, we now have 52. So in that sense, the numbers are not very different. If you look at all the parties on the ballot, it is true that a lot of parties through the provincial legislature elections and the national election, nearly half of the parties on the ballot who are successful are contesting for the first time or were not on the ballot 5 years ago. So yes, there are a number of new parties. The only factor in terms of many new parties is the day after the submission of the candidates lists, the IEC announced that there were over 100 parties intending to contest the National Assembly elections. But when the final lists were published, it was down to 50 or so. So we don't really know. But even those numbers are fairly small numbers, and in itself, they shouldn't overload a system. So it's part one, part the other, but we don't actually have a massive increase in the number of parties taking part.
There's been talk, Michael, by many pundits that this could be a hotly contested election. Talking about 30 years into democracy, new parties, we're seeing also, independent candidates also coming to the fore, raising their hands in terms of the elections. I mean, is that the sign of growing democracy, but also shows the growth that South Africa has seen over the past 30 years as far as elections are concerned?
My own opinion is that allowing smaller parties and a growth of smaller parties mostly reflects a diverse society and increased democratic participation. Clearly some parties are led by people who were figures in other parties, and, you can speculate about the politics in some of those cases. It's a question of people's opinion. Many people say we have too many parties. And practically speaking, yes, a long ballot paper is clumsy. I just in my own opinions, come down on the side of the small guys. I like to see groups of people getting together and participating, and they'll either fail or succeed. But at least they have the opportunity in our democratic environment to give it a good go.
And just finally then, Michael, I mean, looking at the job ahead that the IEC has in terms of, as we said when we started this conversation, printing the ballot papers, are we on track? 29th of May, it's not too far ahead. Would you say that from the outside looking in, if I can put it that way, do you feel that we are on track for May 29th?
The IEC has faced numerous challenges in the past. If we look at the local government elections with COVID and the forced changes to the electoral timetable, there have been challenges. And yet, logistically, the Commission has always, I hope they don't mind me saying, pulled the rabbit out of the hat. Where, even when they've been in a tight spot, they have managed to do it. So there is no indication at this point that the IEC is not on top of the logistical challenge. I'm sure they're having some sleepless nights, and it's a good job we don't see the stress that they experience behind the scenes. But yes, there are challenges. We have the extra ballot paper. There are some changes in the laws. voters must vote in their own voting station or notify the IEC beforehand. So there are some challenges, but from everything we see, logistically there is no reason to expect that the IEC is not on top of the process.
Michael Atkins, let's leave it there, but thank you so much for coming through to speak to us. That is independent election analyst Michael Atkins, just reflecting on that decision by the Electoral Court.